Hi all, as we continue to hibernate at home during the pandemic, I thought it was time to catch up with another very familiar face from rugby league's golden era of the 1980s and 90s, and this time a bit of a surprise. It is not a player, but it is someone who is going to talk to us about the players. It is former referee Greg McCallum. Welcome, Greg.
Adam, how are you? Hello to everyone.
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you, Greg. Thanks for giving up some time to join us. Let's just go through a few of your stats, shall we? 1983, you debuted as a first-grade referee. You went all the way through to 1994. That's some career. Your last game was the grand final, in fact, between the Raiders and Bulldogs. Also, Mal Meninga's final game as a player. How did you last so long? Because, as we know, referees, they cop a lot of flack from fans and media. You must have had a real passion for it.
I suppose it was the balance of life, and that's what I think a lot of people struggle with in the game today. I was a teacher. So, most of my day was taken up worrying about dealing with the kids, and then I'd go home, do some training, and then the weekends would be the games.
Okay, well, I've got a special task for you. I want you to name your top 5 players who you could guarantee would always question your decision out on the field. Let's say they are the Cameron Smith of your era. Take us away, starting at number 5, please.
Yeah, look, I've got Tony Smith there. Some people may not have his name come to mind. He, of course, was the brother of Coach Brian Smith at St George, and I put him in for one particular reason. He generally wasn't the captain of the side, but in the game in 1993 at COGRA, he was the captain, and midway through the second half, he came up to me and said, "Hey, Greg." I turned around and saw him there, and he said, "We want to lodge an official complaint against you." And I'm thinking, what, from something that's happened in today's game, because it was, I think, about 28-8, they were leading at the time. He said, "No, my brother said you missed a forward pass." And I said, "Well, Tony, you go back off the field and tell your brother that you can't make an official complaint over that sort of thing. You can only make it over ruling errors, not judgment calls." And he said, "Oh, I didn't think of that." And I said, "Well, make sure you tell him afterwards." Anyway, Brian Smith came and saw me after the game and apologised and said that wasn't quite the message that he'd sent down to the trainer. Out to Tony, and poor old Tony got the brunt of getting it wrong.
Well, Chinese whispers there. Who have you got at number 4?
I've got at number 4, GAVIN Miller. And GAVIN, of course, at Cronulla, wonderful player, and he and I have become good mates since playing days, as most of the guys and I have. It's one of those things that joins you together, I suppose, or unifies you with the experiences you've had. GAVIN was a cranky old bugger on the field, and GAVIN would come up and stand beside you, wouldn't make it out in the open, and he'd say, "You got that one wrong, Greg." And I'd said, "No, I've got that one right. Let's pack the scrum." He said, "No, Greg, you've got that one wrong." And he'd just do that time and time again. Nothing over the top, but he was the guy that he never really listened to what you said back. It was all about what he wanted to say.
Okay, now, Greg, who is your number 3?
I've got everyone's favourite, Blocker ROACH. Wonderful player, and I think time in the games that we see, time has served him well in terms of his ability on the field. He's so mobile. But the interesting thing about Blocker is that he did question every decision, but he had this sort of very high voice, and you'd blow a penalty and he'd say, "You're going to be kidding, Greg." And you'd turn around and you think there was a woman on the field, but it was Blocker. Blocker would just, it was almost an automatic reaction that he would respond by saying, "You've got to be kidding," or whatever. And one day I sent him to the bin for 5 minutes. And one of the good things, Adam, when I refereed, is you could send players to the bin. And that's how he kept control, and you were encouraged to do it. And it came from, I think, strong administration, the John Quayle, Ken Arthurson era. You didn't have to tolerate players coming at you. And when people like Blocker did have a go at you, and they weren't hammering you or whatever, but that was part of the control of the game. You put him in the bin for 5 minutes and he'd come back out, come and stand next to you and say, "Sorry, Greg, won't do that again."
Very good impersonation of Blocker there too. Who have you got in number 2?
Graham Bradley, the Penguin, ex-Penrith, ex-St George player. I put him down there because he's the player I sinned in the most in my career. He was just one of those players. And it wasn't so much what he'd say to you, it was his body language. You'd penalise him sometimes he'd stand 3 or 4 metres in front of you, and you penalise him for being inside the 5 or the 10 as it was in those days. And he'd just stand there with his hands on his hips, saying, you know, you got to be kidding. And he'd just stand there, and most people would be penalised and run back, but he wanted that sort of confrontation with you. And a couple of times, you know, you pull him over and he'd refuse to come. So you've got this issue with a player challenging your authority. But when I was in England, he, of course, played at Bradford under Matty Elliott and Mick Potter there, and a wonderful player, and but a player that had really no patience for refereeing or referees or touch judges or whatever. So you knew when you had to confront him that there was going to be a little bit of a battle of wits for you to get over the top of. But as I said, a terrific guy and a really strong player.
All right, time now for your number one, the player that you could certainly guarantee would always come up and just query your decision.
Well, I refereed Souths at their best in the 80s, and of course, they had a great pack of forwards, Mario, Les Davidson, David Boyle, those guys, tremendous players. But Craig Coleman was the little, I suppose, line tamer in the background, and Tugger, sometimes he was captain, particularly when Mario was in the bin, but other times he was captain of the side, and he thought it was his duty to remind you every decision you make, whether it was right or wrong. And he'd say to you sometimes, good decision, Greg, if you've given them a penalty. But quickly, he was only telling you it was a good decision so that he could have a go at you when he thought it was a bad decision. And one day we were at Redfern Oval, coming up towards the semi-final series, and we had to pack a scrum. And I said, come on, hurry up, Tugger, put the ball in. And he said, you're not having such a good game today, Greg. He said, I don't think you're going to get a semi-final or the grand final. And I said to him, listen, mate, the way you're playing, you'll be in reserve grade next week, and neither of us will be at the grand final. So he said, oh, what, are you serious? I said, yep, put the ball in. So, you know, they're the sort of conversations that took on, you know, and no one took offence at them. And the great thing about it, Adam, was that we weren't wired up in those days. No one heard what was going on. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could give as good as you got. Not that you'd want to do that too often, but there were times there where you had to stand up for yourself, and, you know, I didn't hesitate to do that.
Now, with Tugger, he would do anything to help the Rabbitohs get over the line. You must have admired his passion.
Oh, absolutely. And as I did with all of these players, I mean, they're all about winning. It's all about winning the game. And Craig was one of those players that he didn't have the skill of some of the players that he played against. You know, the Peter Sterling, Steve Mortimer's, those players, Jeff Tuvey, towards the end of Tugger's career. But what he had was toughness. He had mental toughness, and he had this ability to be able to get on the back of what his forwards were doing. And as I said, you know, people like Les Davidson, Mario Fennick, David Ball, Bill Hardy was in that side. They gave great platform for him to play his game. And when they were going well, as they did in the late 80s, in fact, they probably should have won the premiership in 89. I thought they were the minor premiers that year and bailed out after 2 losses in the semi-final. His ability to be able to drive that pack of forwards and run off the back of them was superb. A very much underestimated player, Tucker.
But what about Cameron Smith? He's obviously famous for asking questions of referees consistently through the 80 minutes. What do you think of the way the modern-day referee handles Cameron Smith?
I think the referees give him too much latitude. I think they're too, well, polite's not the word, but they're too happy to engage with him. And I'm sure if they sat down and watched what was happening in a game, and to see Cameron Smith take up 4 or 5 minutes having a conversation with the referees about stuff that really wasn't relevant at the time. Yeah. Cameron would tell you what was happening 10 minutes ago down the other end of the field. And that's all part of the tactic. And I think, as I said, I don't think the referees in recent years have had the ammunition to be able to deal with Cameron as they should.
Well, Greg, as you know, without referees, there is no game. So hopefully everyone can treat them with the utmost respect when we finally get the footy back underway. Yourself, you're certainly one of the best of your era, and we certainly thank you for your time today and having a chat with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Adam.
No worries. Thank you very much there, Greg McCallum. And thank you for watching the latest instalment of Hibernation Heroes. Stay safe. See you next time.